Here's the transmission. Essentially, transmission was shipped with this shifter on the back here, essentially replacing this cover off plate. Inside, the way these things work is there's one rod with two sockets, so the shifter could be placed this way or this way. So there's two sockets to accept that ball joint. And essentially, what happens is when you shift, you rock a rod and move a rod back and forth. That rod in turn actuates one of three lugs up here, this, middle, or side. By moving, and this is one of the great features of a Tremec transmission. When you buy one, Tremec TKO in particular, you have well, just by count, you have 1, 2, 3, 4. I believe 4 or 5. I think there's two locations up here you can mount it. I could be wrong, but at the very least, there's 4 locations that you can mount your shifter. I'm going with the Midshift simply because that will be, as I mentioned earlier, closer to where I want my hand when I shift the car. This particular shift kit I bought from the same distributor that sold me the tranny. And basically, it's not a Tremec shifter. It is a driveline component shifter. And it actuates the lugs directly. So there's a little bit of work to do. You essentially pop out some pins, rotate the lugs upside down, then put the pins back in. Now, the way this works is there'll be several kits that you can buy that will say, look, drive out these roll pins, and here's one right here. So those are sitting in the lug on the shaft. When you punch them through, of course, they have a chance of falling down into the housing here, which in turn necessitates removal of the rear housing to retrieve these. So what my son and I did was, at the recommendations of the directions actually, is to hang, then it wasn't one of these, it was a clean rag in underneath the lug. So as we pounded these out, they were caught like a safety net, if you will. So we didn't have to pop this off, which is great. Saved us a lot of time. This particular shifter is designed for this location only, and it's even, you can see the mounting plate matches the housing. The transmission still needs a little bit more work. If I tip it up here on the, if you can see it, yeah, you can. This whole part of the transmission needs to be removed. At the very least, this boss and this webbing and boss needs to be removed, simply because in the kit car there's a large 4-inch tube that passes across here. And as you can see, I've temporarily mounted the transmission mount on the mount that we will use. And you can see that this is where it will attach to the chassis, and this part will be cut out so it can fit on top of that cross member. The transmission currently has no oil in it. As you can see, I've put a yoke in the end here, but it's not the yoke I'm going to end up using, simply because it's the completion kit that comes from Factory 5 will have a drive shaft with the yoke on it. However, I'm not going to throw that out because that's worth a lot of money. One little tip, if you are doing this, and regardless of whether or not you're using the Tremec shifter, or you've bought a different manufacturer shifter, Midshift, as I mentioned earlier, there's going to be a requirement in some of them to pop off this rear housing, and I do recommend using my little trick here with the rag, a clean rag of course. I also recommend using a bent punch. Now with this particular kit, it came with this what they refer to as a punch, which looks just like a piece of hardened wire. The left and right outer lugs are easy to use just with a straight punch, but there's a lug that also needs to be removed from the rear shifting point here. And with this particular kit, which doubly removes the need, it holds the old shift shaft in place basically as a deadhead. But what we used was this here neat gizmo, which is nothing more than a cheap punch that's been bent. I'm just holding that up if you can see it. it's been bent. We just gently bent it with a set of vice grips just to scoop down in there and hit the edge of that roll pin, because this one just was far too weak and soft. So we used this and it popped right out. So there's another time saver. So time to move this shifter from here to here. I would say had we done this, because we fiddled a lot with before we bent this punch. I would say it's about a 25-minute to half-hour job, and everything lines up. These things are beautifully made. When you open them up, you realize how nicely they are made. A very nice piece of gear. So my next test is going to, or I guess my next requirement is going to have to be in the car. There's two frame rails, two thin frame rails, 1-inch frame rails that pass on either side of the transmission, basically forming the transmission tunnel of the car. At about this point, if you can picture it, there's a zigzag of support across the top of the transmission tunnel. There's one that cuts right across the shifting pattern here. So had I used the rear position, I'd be fine, but using the mid position, which I prefer, we're going to have a clearance issue. So I'm going to have to take a Sawzall and cut off that crossing piece on the chassis, and then re-weld it perhaps back here or in front, wherever I can find a place that'll fit. So the clearance, I'm assuming back here would probably be the best place. Or some folks have actually left it out altogether. I don't know if I'll do that. I'll probably just re-weld it rearward and more at a right angle to the rails going down the end. Anyway, that's the gist of it. I'll be installing the transmission permanently against the bell housing here as soon as my shift fork and pilot and throw-up bearing come in, and that should be hopefully this week. Anyway, thanks again.